Welcome, everyone. I hope you had a beautiful Rosh Hashanah. Welcome to the Shamayim podcast. My name is Emma Goldblatt, and I'm the program manager here at Shamayim. Today, we are joined by Josh Balk, who is the co-founder and CEO of the Accountability Board. Previously, he was the vice president of farm animal protection at the Humane Society, where he led the passage of a dozen laws banning cages for egg-laying hens, mother pigs, and or veal calves, including the historic California Prop 12 law, the strongest law in the world for farm animals. He also led the corporate negotiations with the largest food companies to enact animal welfare reforms, including McDonald's, Walmart, Kroger, Wendy's, and more. He's also co-founder of Eat Just, the maker of Just Egg, and the first company to ever sell cultivated meat in the world. Prior to his work at HSUS and co-founding Eat Just, he worked at Animal Outlook, where he did undercover investigations at chicken slaughterhouses and factory farms. So with that, welcome to the podcast.
Emma, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Great, we're so glad you could be here. I just wanted to start off by asking you what inspired your journey towards being an animal advocate.
I think probably like you and so many of your viewers and listeners, I just always cared about animals since I was a kid. I always felt bad when I saw an animal who was in pain or who was suffering, especially if the animal was harmed by a person. I just felt like that was such an act of bullying that somebody would harm an innocent animal who had no power to speak up or defend him or herself. And that was just something I had since I was a kid. It wasn't some deep philosophy or I read some big book. There was just something internal. And I think that that's what gives me hope for animals, is that I think so many of us have that instinct that we don't want anyone to feel pain or suffer. As I got older, I started to understand more about what are the issues out there. This is back in the days of VHS. And so I watched a documentary that showed what life is like for an animal inside a factory farm. And as you know, Emma, that most animals raised and killed for food are raised inside these factory farms. And that just opened my eyes. Like, wait a second, this is how pigs and chickens and cows are raised. Seeing how fish are raised in aquaculture operations, which is basically like a water factory farm. Just all that opened my eyes. And I was in high school. And so I, changed my diet. I became vegetarian and eventually vegan. And I really wanted to make my life to help these animals. I just thought, for me personally, anything that I can bring for this world, I thought it would be a righteous time for me to spend my days trying to make things better for these animals who do need a voice out there fighting on their behalf. And the last thing I'll add to that is that I was raised by my dad, and he was part of the Jewish contingent from Pennsylvania that would go down south in the 1960s to march alongside those in the civil rights movement. So he would join African Americans in marches, and part of it is that there was a lot of violence, and the idea is that if there were white people marching with Black people, there'd be less violence. And so he put himself on the line. And then he later taught about things like the Holocaust, like civil rights, like Indian independence with Gandhi. And he always instilled it into me, just do something in your life to make things better, especially for those who need your help. Don't just float in life and just accept when things are bad. Do something about it. And I think the combination of my instinct to be against the suffering and pain inflicted on animals, and my dad really pushing me to do something in my life to make things better, I think that combined is why I've certainly devoted my life so far and hopefully throughout my entire life to help animals.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Can you tell us more about the organization you work for?
I'd be honored to do that. I spent much of my life working at the Humane Society of the United States, where I led work to pass laws to help farm animals. So just to take a step back, so an egg-laying hen in the United States, she's typically confined in a cage about the size of your home microwave. She's stuffed in there with maybe 6 to 8 other chickens. She's unable even to ever spread her wings. She's given less space than a sheet of paper on which to live. She's forced to eat, sleep, lay eggs, defecate in the same small space every single day her entire life. A mother pig in the pork industry is typically confined in a cage known as a gestation crate. This is a crate barely larger than the pig's own body. She's unable ever to turn around. She's forced to be in this position for years on end. Like, can you imagine never being able to turn around for years? Well, this is what we do to a mother pig in the pork industry. And those are two of the extreme abuses that go on within the meat industry and the egg industry. And so what I have done is work to pass laws across the country that ban these practices. And in several states, including California, Massachusetts, ban the sale of eggs and pork that comes from operations where animals were treated in this manner. Very proud of the work I've done and so many wonderful people I worked alongside to pass those laws. Also at the Humane Society, I worked with the largest food companies to enact policies to eventually stop using eggs and pork that comes from these operations. And that's great that we got companies like McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and Walmart and Kroger and dozens others to commit to one day doing it. That's phenomenal. It's great. It's one thing to promise to do something, it's another thing to do it. And what inspired me to found this organization with a dear friend of mine named Matt Prescott, the accountability board was designed by us to invest in the largest food companies in the United States around the world. And as investors, we're able to engage the companies at the highest level of the company to actually follow through with commitments they've made on animal issues and other issues, by the way. And no longer could these companies just view this engaging with the company as a bunch of outsiders, just telling them what to do. Oh, can't you do better? Can't you do better? No, now because of the work we're doing, we come from the inside as actual investors saying, wait a second, you made these commitments. Where are you at on following through? We want to see where you're at now, and we want to see your plans on how you're going to reach to the final conclusion that you promised investors, which is to get to 100% cage free on eggs. So eggs that come from chickens are not confined in these cages, and gestation crate free for pigs. Pork from operations don't confine pigs in cages. So those are two of the most critical issues that we focus on the animal side. I believe this is likely the most effective approach on a global scale to help farm animals, because food companies have a global footprint. You know, McDonald's is publicly traded in the United States, but they have supply chains all around the world. If McDonald's actually goes cage free on eggs globally, all of a sudden we're not just helping egg laying chickens in the United States. We're helping them in South America and Eastern Europe and Asia and all across the world. And that's what we could do for hundreds of companies. And I feel like we've already accomplished a lot at the accountability board. We haven't been around even a year at this point, but we've had some major victories for egg-laying hens and mother pigs, and we're just getting started. Coming up in the fall, we're going to be filing dozens of shareholder proposals that go on the company's proxy. If you're publicly traded, you have a proxy that goes out once a year to all your investors. And as shareholders, and we have a certain amount of money that we have in a company, to allow us to actually put a question on the ballot, which is basically a question on the proxy that people can vote on if you're a shareholder. And that is one of the avenues that we are able to employ as investors and raise issues to a very high level of the company that otherwise those issues would not even be discussed at. I feel like we're going to have a lot more victories to come, and I'm really excited for the future.
That's really exciting to hear. Can you tell us about the EATS Act and how our community can help?
The EATS Act is one of the worst things that has ever been proposed related to animals in history of the United States. So here's the story, friends. Because of the laws that I talked about earlier that were passed, the egg industry has by and large shifted to cage free in terms of the momentum of the industry by and large is shifting to cage-free. They're getting closer and closer to 50% cage-free in the United States. When I started this, there were low single digits. So we've made a lot of progress helping hundreds of millions of chickens annually to go cage-free. The pork industry was at low single digits in terms of the number of operations and number of pigs who were out of these cages. Now we're getting closer to 50% of these mother pigs who aren't perpetually confined in cages. That's good, and we have a lot of progress. However, especially in the pork industry, there's a lot of opposition for change. And what they have tried to do is overturn the elections in California, Massachusetts, where via ballot measures, so people can vote on a ballot, like they vote for governor or senator or congress member, they voted to pass laws in Massachusetts and California to ban the production and sale of pork from operations that confine pigs in these crates, along with eggs and veal from caged animals too. So the pork industry fought those elections and lost. Overwhelmingly, we won. And ordinary people are just don't like the idea of these animals suffering in these cages. So what did the pork industry do next, Emma? Did they accept that the future, like, okay, we heard from consumers, we hear you, we'll move away from these crates? No, they sued to try to overturn those elections, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And this past year, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in the animals' favor, saying, no, those elections stand, those laws stand, and it was fully constitutional what happened to ban those practices and the sale of products in those practices. That's good. Now, here's how we're getting to the so-called EATS Act. The pork industry isn't through. They lost in the election. They lost at the Supreme Court. All the major food companies say they're moving away from the practice. So their last gasp of hope is going to Congress. And for Congress to, within the Farm Bill, which is a big, giant bill that gets passed every 5 or 6 years, to stick in language in this bill that overturns the California and Massachusetts elections to ban the sale of pork from operations that confine pigs in gestation crates. And so this EATS Act has been pushed forward by a legislator in Iowa, a senator from Kansas, and they're trying to get this complete this year, early next year. Fortunately, Emma, there's a lot of opposition. There's opposition from animal protection organizations, opposition from farmers themselves who've already made these changes, saying, wait a second, we've already spent millions of dollars getting rid of these cages and crates. Now you're trying to overturn these laws. It's too late. We've already done this. So it's opposition from farming groups, opposition from environmental organizations, because these type of actions to overturn these elections would also overturn environmental laws. Opposition from labor groups, opposition from voting rights groups. There's a whole coalition opposing this. And the good news is that we've come so far that the legislators feel as if the EATS Act is dead. That's good. However, we're not done. We're not done, because what the opposition is trying to do is to reword the EATS Act to still accomplish it in this upcoming farm bill, but be able to tell legislators, oh, hey, legislators, don't wait. We know there's a lot of opposition. We know 171 House members sign on to a letter against it. We know 30 senators sign on to a letter against it. We get it. We get it. Don't worry. It's not in the farm bill anymore. No worries. However, know what they're trying to do sneakily? They're trying to do the same thing, but in different words. You know what? That's what happens in Congress. They do little shady things like that. And so we now have to focus to ensure that there's no language in the Farm Bill that overturns the elections in California and Massachusetts. Now, I can tell you, Emma, why the Jewish community has really been on the forefront of opposing this. Well, one reason is that, you know, at least when I went to Hebrew school, and I know so many of my colleagues who were Jewish went to Hebrew school, we were taught at a young age about compassion to animals. That's just part of what we learn. It's just part of our culture. You know, it's part of the Torah. And so Jews have been on the forefront of fighting overturning elections for humane reasons, to ensure that animals have a better life. Another reason why is that this type of language to overturn elections in California and Massachusetts is written in such a way that would also overturn any laws in states that have rules related to kosher labeling. And
Mm,
so it's like, wait a second, this is written, wiping out these agricultural laws goes so far, it even gets to kosher labeling laws. And
mhm.
so that's another reason why our community has been fired up to oppose this. And finally, for other reasons, keeping elections maintained has been a top of mind issue in the United States. And the idea of an overturning elections for so many of us, no matter what outcomes they are, it just seems against who we are as democracy loving people. And just because an interest group doesn't like the outcome of an election doesn't give them right to work in Congress to overturn it. And so even just for that reason, our community, which, listen, we're from all around the world. My family's from Russia. So much of our community came here because of freedom and democracy. The idea of just ending democracy for certain areas because an interest group didn't like how things turned out is just against who we are, I think, as Americans, as people who, at least for me, many generational from my parents, my great grandparents immigrating to the United States. It just goes against what even they thought of America. So fortunately, we're fighting hard. But what I would ask people to do, if you're open and willing to do it, just contact your House representative member, contact both your senators, ask them to oppose anything in the Farm Bill that overturns California's and Massachusetts farm animal elections. That's all you have to do. People who answer the calls, they're really nice. Emma, I swear to God, they are so nice. They want to hear from constituents. They're going to be polite. They're going to hear you. They're going to take your number. Just say that you are a constituent. Just say, hey, I live in this town. Congress member so-and-so is my Congress member. Here's what I have to say. Do the same thing with senators. Again, all you have to say is, please oppose any language in the Farm Bill that overturns California and Massachusetts elections related to farm animals. And make sure that no language in the Farm Bill allows that to occur. That's what I'm hoping people could do.
Okay, good to know. I will make sure to share that with everyone. And what is the deadline for this?
Oh, thank you for asking. So they're working on the Farm Bill right now.
Mm,
So if there's ever a day in a week to make a call to your Congress member and both your senators, it's this week. So they're hoping, when I say they, the House Agricultural Committee, there's a Senate and the House, as folks know, there's a House Agricultural Committee is trying to have a draft of the Farm Bill this month complete. We want to make sure this horrible language that would overturn these elections is not in there, that they want to complete the draft this week. The Senate might take a little bit longer. So this is the time the drafts occur. Now, it's going to take months to play out in terms of getting committee votes in the House Ag Committee, in the Senate Ag Committee, the full Senate, the full House. Then when they come together to try to reconcile the bills, it's a longer process over several months. But this week is actually very critical to make the call. So this horrible language that could be in the Farm Bill is not in the original draft.
okay, great to know. This is time sensitive, folks. So you heard what to do. Take a few minutes out of your day. It'd be a great thing to do in honor of the high holidays. And thank you so much, Josh, for coming on and sharing about what you do and how people can help. I wanted to wish everyone, happy holidays. And I hope you have a beautiful Yom Kippur coming up. Just a reminder that we have 2 weeks left in our fundraiser to sell shirts. We have shirts now. I'll put the link wherever this podcast is. So if you want to represent Shamayim and also, make a donation to the work we do, that would be great. There's only 2 weeks left. So thank you everyone for listening and have a great rest of your day.